At the office party, my husband's new woman wore my dress. His face went pale when I realized it was my own stepsister. Everyone held their breath as I handed him the envelope. He opened it, his hands shaking, and the moment his eyes hit the first line, he knew the life he built on my back was over. Hello everyone. Thank you for being here with me today. Before I begin my story, I'd love to know which city you're joining us from. Please feel free to share in the comments. Now, let me take you into this story. I knew something was off the second we walked into that ballroom. You know that feeling, right? When a room is full of people, but it's too quiet. The air wasn't thick with perfume or the usual buzz of chatter from hundreds of conversations happening at once. It was heavy, weighted down with whispers. The kind of hushed, urgent whispers that stop the moment you look in their direction. It felt like walking into a room where everyone shared a secret, and the secret was me. My husband, Gregory, didn't notice. Or, more likely, he chose not to. He was in his element. He straightened his already perfect designer tie, the one I'd bought him for his birthday, and flashed that polished politician's smile he'd perfected over the years. Look at this turnout, he murmured to me, his eyes already scanning the room for someone more important to talk to. Thompson from marketing is over there. I need to have a word with him about the new quarter. He gave my arm a perfunctory squeeze and then released it, already moving toward a group of men in identical dark suits. He'd clap a guy on the back, laugh a little too loudly at a joke that wasn't funny, his voice booming with false confidence. Tonight was supposed to be the pinnacle of his career so far, the celebration for his big promotion to vice president. It was the promotion he'd been chasing for years, the one I had supported with thousands of reheated dinners, cancelled plans with friends, and lonely nights spent waiting for him to come home. As far as he was concerned, this night was all about him. But the whispers weren't about his promotion. I could feel it. The way heads would turn as I walked past the sad-looking shrimp cocktail buffet, the way women in glittering gowns would lean in toward each other, their eyes flicking over to me with a look that was a sickening mix of pity and morbid curiosity. They were about her. I saw her before she saw me. She was holding court by the ridiculously large champagne fountain, the centerpiece of the room, laughing that high, tinkling laugh that had always grated on my nerves. A glass of champagne dangled from her perfectly manicured fingers. And then she turned, and the breath caught in my throat, hot and sharp. It wasn't a stranger. It wasn't some nameless, faceless woman I could hate from a distance. It was my stepsister, Amber. My mother had married her father when I was a teenager, and Amber had been a thorn in my side ever since. Always a little too competitive, always with a backhanded compliment ready. I'd spent years trying to build a bridge, for my mother's sake, trying to create the blended family my mom so desperately wanted after my father passed. But looking at her now, with that smug, self-satisfied grin playing on her lips, I realized she'd been building a bonfire behind my back, waiting for the right moment to light the match. But what truly froze me, what made the blood drain from my face and a roaring sound fill my ears, wasn't just her presence there, schmoozing with Gregory's colleagues. It was the dress. My dress. A jade green silk sheath. Simple, elegant, and utterly unique. The one Gregory had bought for me for our 7th anniversary dinner at that fancy, Michelin-starred French restaurant downtown. I remembered every detail of that night. The way the candlelight had made the silk shimmer. His words as I'd put it on. "Lorraine," he'd whispered, his voice thick with a rare emotion, "you look unforgettable in that. I will never, ever forget this night." And there was Amber, wearing my unforgettable memory like a trophy she had just won. My heart didn't just pound against my ribs, it felt like a trapped bird, beating its wings frantically, trying to break out. The whispers grew louder, turning from a low hum into a clear, buzzing noise. People were staring openly now, their eyes darting from me in my simple black dress, to Gregory, who was oblivious across the room, and then back to Amber, shining like a venomous jewel in my dress. We were a cruel little triangle of public humiliation. Gregory finally noticed the dead space that had formed around me. He'd finished his conversation and was walking back, a fresh drink in his hand. He saw my face, and his smile faltered. "What's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." I couldn't speak. I just lifted a trembling hand and pointed. He followed my gaze. I watched the color drain from his face. He looked like he'd been punched in the gut, the air knocked out of him. The fake smile vanished, replaced by a mask of pure, unadulterated panic. "Lorraine," he whispered, his hand grabbing my elbow, his grip suddenly painfully tight. "Don't." "Don't what, Gregory?" My voice was sharp, brittle, and loud. It cut through the quiet, and more heads turned. "Don't what?" He didn't get a chance to answer. Because Amber, confident in her cruelty, seeing she had an audience, was walking toward us. Every step was deliberate, her heels clicking on the marble floor like a countdown to an execution. She stopped right in front of us, her eyes scanning my simple black cocktail dress with a flicker of disdain before meeting my gaze. A slow, venomous smile spread across her face, a smile that said, "I won, and you know it." "Lorraine," she cooed, her voice dripping with the fake sweetness she'd perfected over years of family dinners. "Fancy seeing you here. I didn't know you came to these things." She then gestured down at the jade green silk clinging to her body. "And oh, what a coincidence." She looked from the dress to my face. I didn't know we had the same taste. The room held its breath. I could feel dozens of pairs of eyes on me, a physical weight, waiting for me to cry, to scream, to run out of the room in tears. They were waiting for the humiliated wife to play her part. And in that moment, something inside me snapped. The quiet, supportive Lorraine who packed his lunches and ironed his shirts, the woman who always chose to keep the peace, just vanished. She was gone. In her place stood a woman who had absolutely nothing left to lose. I forced a smile onto my lips, a tight, cold thing that didn't reach my eyes. "There's no coincidence, Amber. That dress was mine first. It was a gift from my husband." I let the words hang in the air for a moment. "But I suppose you would know that, wouldn't you?" She blinked, a flicker of genuine panic in her eyes before she recovered. "I have no idea what you're talking about." Gregory stammered, his face a blotchy red, his hand still clamped on my arm. "Lorraine, this isn't what it looks like. This is a misunderstanding. Let's just go home, and we can talk about this." "A misunderstanding?" I pulled my arm from his grasp and turned on him, my voice rising, loud and clear enough for everyone in the vicinity to hear. "So, she just happened to show up in my dress? The one you called unforgettable? The one you swore was just for me, for our special night?" My voice cracked on the last words, not from weakness, but from a rage so pure and so deep it felt white-hot. Gasps rippled through the crowd. I saw phones starting to emerge from pockets and purses, the little red recording lights blinking on. This wasn't just an office party anymore. This was a soap opera, and I was done playing the supporting role. Amber, seeing her little victory lap turning sour, tried to reclaim her position. She placed a possessive hand on Gregory's arm, a clear gesture of ownership. And that was it. That was the breaking point. Before I even consciously decided to move, my hand flew through the air. The crack of my palm connecting with his cheek echoed through the vast ballroom, sharper and more final than the clink of champagne glasses. His head snapped to the side from the force of it. The room went dead silent. A collective, audible intake of breath was the only sound. I leaned in close, so close I could see the red imprint of my hand starting to form on his skin. My voice was a low, vicious hiss that only he could hear. "You humiliated me. In front of everyone I know. But tonight, you're the one who gets to burn." I took a step back, my composure fully returned. I reached into my small clutch and pulled out the thick, white business envelope I'd tucked away there earlier that evening, a little piece of insurance I had hoped I wouldn't need. His name was scrawled across the front in my handwriting. He frowned, utterly confused, as I shoved it against his chest. "What's this?" he stammered, his eyes wide with shock and the stinging pain in his cheek. Open it, I said, my voice ringing out in the tomb-like silence. Go on. Read it out loud, if you dare. His hands trembled as he took it, his fingers fumbling with the flap. He didn't open it. He didn't need to. The color had drained from his face again, leaving it a pasty, sickly white. He knew. He didn't know how I knew, but he knew exactly what that was. It was a letter from my lawyer, a man I had met in secret 2 weeks ago. It was proof that while he was sneaking around, I had been building an arsenal. It was proof that his little empire wasn't as secure as he thought. Amber's smug smile had completely vanished. She pulled her hand back from his arm as if it were on fire. This wasn't just a marital spat anymore. This was a demolition. I straightened my shoulders, my spine like steel. I let my gaze sweep across the crowd. Executives, their wives, young associates, interns, all the people Gregory had spent years trying to impress. And now, he stood before them, exposed, slapped, and holding the first official document of his downfall. Enjoy your party, I said, my voice cool and steady as ice. It's the last one you'll host with my money on your arm. Then I turned and walked away. I didn't rush. My heels struck the polished marble floor with a rhythmic, deliberate beat. Each step was a declaration of war. Behind me, I heard his voice, thin and desperate, break through the stunned silence. Lorraine, wait. I didn't even hesitate. I pushed through the grand ballroom doors and out into the cool night air. My chest was heaving, my pulse racing, but I wasn't broken. Not anymore. I was electric, alive with a new, terrifying clarity. This wasn't over. This was just the beginning. Driving away from that hotel, the glittering skyline of Chicago blurred into long, watery streaks through my windshield. It wasn't just tears, it was the past 10 years of my life flashing before my eyes, a highlight reel of my own foolishness. 10 years of believing in a man who was, at his core, a complete and utter lie. I met Gregory when I was 22, waiting tables at a high-end steakhouse to pay my way through my last year of art school. He was older, 30, already a junior analyst with a salary that seemed like a fortune to me. He'd come in with clients, always impeccably dressed, always charming. He'd request my section specifically. He tipped too much and smiled like he had the whole world figured out. And I, a girl who was tired of being broke and struggling, believed him. By the time I graduated with my degree in graphic design, I had an engagement ring on my finger. We started small, in a tiny one-bedroom apartment with mismatched furniture and a mountain of student loan debt, mostly his. We'd stay up late, spread out on the living room floor with cheap wine, planning our future. But looking back, it was always his future we were planning. When he announced he wanted to get his MBA from Northwestern, I was the one who said, "Of course, honey. I'll get a second job waitressing on weekends. We'll make it work." My own dreams, my portfolio full of designs, got packed away in a cardboard box under the bed, gathering dust. Then my mother passed away. It was sudden, a heart attack that took her in her sleep. It shattered me. She didn't have much, but she left me her small house, the one I grew up in. That little bungalow was my only tangible connection to her, my only real asset. The inheritance was all I had left of her. A few months after the funeral, Gregory started circling listings for big houses in the suburbs. "Lorraine," he'd said, putting his arm around me as we stood in the cramped kitchen of our apartment. "If we sell your mom's place, we'll have more than enough for a down payment on a house like this. Think of it as her investing in our future. In Daisy's future." Our daughter, Daisy, was my whole world. Holding her tiny body for the first time made every sacrifice feel worth it. And I wanted her to have that perfect house, that green lawn, that safe suburban life I never had. So I signed the papers. I walked through my childhood home one last time, my hand trailing along the familiar floral wallpaper, and then I handed the keys to a stranger. Looking back, it feels like I handed Gregory the keys to my entire past, and he just drove away with it. And then there was Amber. My mother had married her father, a widower named Frank, about 5 years into my marriage to Gregory. I was happy for my mom, she'd been lonely for so long. I tried with Amber, I really did. I invited her for holidays, remembered her birthday, listened to her endless complaints about her job and her boyfriends. But there was always a current of resentment from her. She'd make little digs, always wrapped in a smile. "Oh, Lorraine, it must be so nice not to have to worry about a career and just focus on your home." Or she'd look at a new piece of furniture and say, "Gregory must have gotten a huge bonus. You're so lucky." It was always about what Gregory provided, what I had. It was never about me. The warning signs of the affair were there, I see that now with painful clarity. The business trips that seemed to happen on weekends. The way he'd angle his phone away from me when a text came through. The way Amber started showing up at our house more often, always when Gregory was home, always with a flimsy excuse. "Oh, I was just in the neighborhood and thought I'd pop in." My best friend, Beatrice, had tried to warn me. We were having coffee one afternoon about 6 months before the party. She was scrolling through her phone and suddenly stopped. "Hey, isn't that Gregory's car?" she'd asked, showing me a photo a friend had just posted. It was a picture of a crowded outdoor cafe, and in the background, you could clearly see Gregory and Amber sitting at a table for two, leaning in close, laughing. "He told me he had a lunch meeting with a client from out of town," I'd said, my stomach twisting. "Does his client look exactly like your stepsister?" Beatrice had asked gently. I'd gotten defensive. I'd made excuses. She was probably just asking him for career advice. You know how she is. You're imagining things, B. How I wish I had listened. The truth is, I didn't want to see it. Seeing it would mean admitting that the life I had sacrificed everything for was a house of cards. And that night, at that party, I didn't just see the house of cards. I watched my own husband and my own sister burn it to the ground. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in a lumpy armchair in my sister's guest room, watching the gray light of dawn seep through the blinds. A mug of coffee I'd made hours ago sat untouched on the end table, cold and bitter. There were no more tears. There was just a cold, hard clarity that felt like a shard of glass in my gut. For the first time in a decade, I wasn't wondering what Gregory wanted or what would make him happy. I was thinking about what I needed to do to survive. As soon as I knew he'd be at the office, frantically doing damage control after the spectacle I'd made, I drove back to my house. His house. The key felt strange in my hand, like I was breaking into someone else's life. The sight of his perfectly organized closet, suits in a row from light to dark, his expensive cologne hanging in the air, almost made me break. For a second, I just wanted to crawl into our bed and pull the covers over my head. But then I walked into Daisy's room, with its pink walls and legion of stuffed animals, and the weakness vanished. This wasn't about him anymore. This was about protecting her. I started packing. It wasn't the frantic, tearful packing of a heartbroken woman. It was methodical, calculated. I grabbed 3 large suitcases from the attic. One for Daisy's clothes and favorite toys. One for my essentials. The third was for documents, our birth certificates, passports, Daisy's medical records, my mother's old jewelry box, and the file containing the deed to the house and our financial statements. My hands were steady. This wasn't a retreat, it was a tactical maneuver. My first call was from the car, parked a block away from the house. I called our financial advisor, a man named Mr. Henderson who had always been a little too deferential to Gregory. "Mr. Henderson, it's Lorraine Johnson," I said, my voice even and firm. "I need to move half of the funds from our joint investment account into a new, separate account under my name only. Immediately." There was a hesitant pause. "Well, Mrs. Johnson, that's a significant transaction. Typically for something like this, we would need Gregory's." "Mr. Henderson," I cut in, my voice dropping a degree, "legally, half of that portfolio is mine. I am instructing you to make the transfer." If you require me to come in and sign paperwork, I can be there in 20 minutes. If you feel you must contact my husband, then my next call will be to the SEC to discuss your fiduciary duty to me as a co-owner of that account. The threat was empty, but it sounded good. The silence on the other end was telling. I'll prepare the paperwork for your signature, Mrs. Johnson, he said quickly. My next call was to the credit card company. I'm reporting all of our joint cards lost, I told the operator. Please freeze them immediately and issue a new one only in my name, Lorraine Miller. That's Miller, my maiden name. By noon, I was sitting in a high-rise office downtown, across a large mahogany desk from a woman with sharp eyes and an even sharper suit. Her name was Catherine Davies, and she was known for being a shark. I want a divorce, I told her, before she'd even finished introducing herself. And I want full custody of my daughter. She listened without interruption as I laid it all out. The party, the dress, my stepsister. I slid a folder across the desk containing copies of the financial statements and the photos Beatrice had taken. He's been using our joint funds to support her, I said. I can't prove it all yet, but I know it. She nodded slowly, a grim smile on her face. Oh, honey, she said. We'll find it. Men like him are arrogant. They always leave a trail. Gregory finally came home that evening to my sister's house, where I was waiting. He must have gotten the alerts about the bank transfers. He walked in, bypassing my sister's protests, his face a mask of fury. He stopped dead in the living room when he saw the packed suitcases by the door. What the hell is this? What have you done? He demanded. I folded Daisy's school sweater and placed it in the open bag without looking at him. It's called leaving, Gregory. Something you should be familiar with. He ran a hand through his hair, pacing like a caged animal. Lorraine, you can't just take the money. We need to talk. We can fix this. I laughed. A real, actual laugh. The sound startled even me. Fix this? You paraded my stepsister, my sister, in my dress in front of your entire office. You've been lying to me for God knows how long. There is nothing left to fix. His jaw clenched. You're being hysterical. Think about Daisy. Think about our family. At that, I finally looked at him, my eyes like chips of ice. I am thinking about Daisy. That's why I'm done letting her grow up in a house full of lies. She deserves better than a father who uses his wife's inheritance to bankroll his affair with her aunt. The words hit him like another slap. His mouth opened, then shut. He looked smaller, somehow. Weaker. I've already spoken to a lawyer, I said, pulling the copy of the official letter of representation from my bag and placing it on the coffee table. You'll be served soon. His face went white. You talked to a lawyer? Of course I did, I said, zipping the last bag. What did you think I was going to do? Sit at home, cry, and wait for you to come home with lipstick on your collar again? He tried to follow me as I headed for the door, but I held up a hand. Stay back, Gregory. Every step you take toward me from now on, remember, I'm already 10 steps ahead. I walked out of that house and didn't look back. I wasn't just leaving a man. I was leaving the woman I used to be. And she was never, ever coming back. Gregory always believed that money was power, and that appearances were everything. The fancy car, the expensive suits, the reservations at restaurants where you had to know someone to get a table. It was all a performance, a carefully curated image of success. But when the props are taken away, the actor is left standing alone on an empty stage, blinking in the harsh spotlight. The first crack appeared 2 days later. I got a text from a mutual acquaintance, a woman named Sharon whose husband worked with Gregory. I hadn't spoken to her in months, but suddenly, she was my best friend. You won't believe this. Gregory just tried to pay for lunch with clients at the Capitol Grill and his corporate card was declined. So embarrassing. He tried another one and it was declined too. He had to have one of the junior guys pay. I read the text and allowed myself a small, grim smile. I could picture it perfectly, his forced, hearty laugh, the fumbling in his wallet for another card, the look of confusion turning to cold panic when that one failed, too. By freezing our accounts, I hadn't just cut him off financially. I had stripped him of his favorite costume, the successful, in-control executive. Amber was the next to feel the chill. She wasn't in it for love, she was in it for the lifestyle. The weekend trips to Napa, the shopping sprees on Michigan Avenue, the thrill of having a powerful man foot the bill. When those bills suddenly stopped being paid, the shine wore off fast. Another coworker, a young woman in the marketing department, told Beatrice that she'd seen them arguing in the office parking lot. She said Amber was waving her hands, her face a mask of fury, while Gregory stood there, red-faced, trying to calm her down. I guess she didn't sign up for the budget version of the affair, the coworker had quipped to Beatrice. Meanwhile, I was trying to build a new, smaller life. My sister, bless her heart, let me and Daisy stay in her guest room. It was cramped, and Daisy missed her big bedroom, but it was safe. It was a haven from the storm. Daisy was confused, of course. "Why can't we go home, Mommy?" she'd ask at night, her little face full of worry. I'd hug her tight and say, "We're on a little adventure for a while. It's just you and me." I tried to make it fun. We went to the park, we got ice cream for dinner, we built a fort out of blankets in the living room. Her resilience gave me a strength I desperately needed. Gregory, on the other hand, was not handling things gracefully. Once he realized I wasn't going to unfreeze the cards, he started blowing up my phone. At first, the voicemails were angry, full of threats and bluster. "You can't just take everything, Lorraine. That's my money too. I'll see you in court." When I didn't respond, the tone changed. The anger turned to pathetic begging. "Lorraine, please, pick up. Let's just talk. We can work this out. Think about all the years we had. Don't throw it all away over a stupid mistake. Don't do this to our family. Don't do this to Daisy." I listened to one of his pleading messages, where he talked about all they had built together, and I felt a surge of cold fury. He hadn't built this. We had. With my support, my sacrifice, and the money from my mother's house. I calmly pressed the button and blocked his number. Silence drives a desperate man mad. One night, around 9 o'clock, there was a loud, frantic banging on my sister's front door. It was him. He was shouting my name, demanding to see me, demanding to see Daisy. I was upstairs, reading Daisy a bedtime story. She started to cry, frightened by the noise. I held her close, whispering that everything was okay, while my brother-in-law, a big, no-nonsense guy named Tom, went down to handle it. I heard Tom's deep, booming voice through the door. "You need to leave, Gregory. Now. You're trespassing, and you're scaring my kids. If you're not gone in 30 seconds, I'm calling the police." I peeked through the blinds of the guest room window. The porch light cast a sickly yellow glow on him. He was pacing on the sidewalk, pulling at his hair, a man completely unraveled. He was shouting that this was all a mistake, that he just needed to explain. Explain what? That he'd fallen in love with my sister? That he thought my anniversary dress would look better on her? There was nothing left to explain. And while he fell apart, people noticed. His world, once so carefully constructed, was crumbling brick by brick. His promotion was suddenly on hold, pending the internal review of his expense reports. Clients were backing away. In his world, image was everything, and his was shattered. The man who lived for the spotlight was now just a mess on a suburban sidewalk, and the only audience he had was a brother-in-law who was about to call the cops on him. He finally stumbled away into the darkness, a pathetic, defeated figure. A week later, my sister insisted on having a quiet family night. Just us, she promised, her voice firm over the phone. I'm making my lasagna. Tom will pick up a movie. The girls need some normal. You need some normal. I was hesitant. The thought of being a guest in someone else's happy family life was still a raw wound, but I agreed. I wanted that for Daisy. I wanted her to laugh with her cousin, to eat greasy, cheesy lasagna around a table where love wasn't a transaction or a weapon. For an hour, it was almost perfect. The smell of garlic bread filled the air, the girls were giggling in the corner over a board game, and Tom was telling a long, rambling story about a guy at his work. It felt normal. Safe. And then the front door opened without a knock. Gregory strode in like he still owned the place, like he had every right to be there. He wore one of his expensive suits, but it hung on him differently now. It was tired and wrinkled, just like him. And trailing behind him, with the audacity of a queen returning to her castle, was Amber. She had the nerve to smile, a brittle, defiant little smile, as she slid her coat off her shoulders as if she'd just arrived for cocktails. The room went dead silent. The laughter died in our throats. Daisy froze, a piece of garlic bread halfway to her mouth. My sister shot me a panicked look across the table. My brother-in-law, Tom, slowly put his fork down, and his entire posture changed. He went from relaxed dad to protective grizzly bear in a split second. "Lorraine," Gregory said, holding up his hands in a gesture that was meant to be placating but was just infuriating. "Please. We need to talk. You can't keep shutting me out. This is our family." I stood up slowly, my chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. "Family?" My voice was dangerously quiet, and all the more menacing for it. "You brought your mistress, my own sister, to my family's dinner table and you dare to use that word?" Daisy, sensing the terrifying shift in the atmosphere, started to cry. My sister, a miracle of efficiency and grace, scooped her up along with my niece. "Come on, sweeties," she said in a bright, fake voice. "Let's go see if there's any ice cream in the freezer." She ushered them into the kitchen and quietly shut the door. She didn't need to see what was coming next. Gregory glanced around nervously, like a cornered animal. He hadn't expected me to fight back in front of witnesses. "You don't understand," he started, his voice low and urgent. "Amber and I." I cut him off with a laugh so sharp and cold it felt like it could shatter glass. "Oh, don't bother explaining. I already know all about it. The hotel receipts from your business trips. The bank transfers. The late-night charges on the credit card I froze. You left a paper trail a mile long, Gregory. You're not smart, you're just arrogant." Amber's face drained of color. "What receipts?" she hissed at him, her voice a venomous whisper. "You told me you were careful." I pulled out my phone. I'd been preparing for this moment. "These receipts," I said, and started swiping. I'd created a special photo album just for the occasion. Screenshots of texts he'd forgotten were synced to our shared family cloud. Copies of credit card statements my lawyer had already subpoenaed. There was even a time-stamped selfie he'd sent her from a hotel bed in what was clearly not a budget room. "And this one's my favorite," I said, stopping on a new photo. A little gift from a private investigator. It was a picture of him, just last week, having a very cozy dinner with a brunette who was definitely not Amber. Gregory lunged forward, his hand reaching for my phone. "Stop it," he snapped. I pulled it back. "What's wrong?" "Afraid Amber might see the other woman you've been entertaining on the side?" A collective gasp from my sister and Tom. Amber staggered back as if I'd physically struck her, her eyes narrowing into slits of pure fury. "You told me she was the only thing standing in our way," she spat at Gregory, her voice shaking with rage. "You told me it was just a matter of time." Gregory froze. His eyes darted from her to me, then to Tom, who had crossed his massive arms and was now blocking the doorway like a bouncer at the world's saddest nightclub. "You're a liar," Amber said, her voice rising to a shriek. "You're pathetic." She grabbed her expensive purse from the chair where she'd dropped it. I am not ruining my reputation for this mess. And with that, she stormed out, slamming the door so hard a picture frame rattled on the wall. Gregory stood there alone, the silence in the room heavier than stone. He opened his mouth, but I beat him to it. You wanted to play the big man, Gregory. Show off your conquest. But here's the truth. You're not a prize. You're a warning. And everyone in this room just watched your mask fall off. My sister reappeared from the kitchen, her face flushed with anger. Get out, she snapped at him. Before Tom drags you out. Gregory looked at me, his eyes filled with a desperation I'd never seen before. Lorraine, please, don't do this. You're turning everyone against me. Just stop. I stepped closer, close enough that he couldn't miss the finality in my eyes. You did this all by yourself. You humiliated yourself, Gregory. I just turned on the lights so everyone else could see it. And just like that, he was alone. The mask was ripped off, and everyone saw the pathetic man hiding underneath. My sister put her arm around me, and for the first time in a long time, I could finally breathe. What he did next, how deep he would sink, well, that's another story. If you're still listening, please do me a huge favor and like this video, and comment the number 1 down below. That way, I'll know you gave me a like, and I'll know you're right here with me on this journey. Your support is a huge encouragement and means the world to me. Just comment the number 1, and then I'll tell you what happened next. Gregory, of course, didn't know how to accept defeat. He was a man who had spun lies and charm into a successful career, and he thought he could still control the story. He was wrong. Dead wrong. 3 days after the disaster at my sister's house, his LinkedIn feed lit up. He wrote a long, rambling, self-pitying post about navigating difficult personal struggles and the pain of betrayal within the home. He painted himself as a hardworking, devoted husband who had been blindsided by a spiteful, emotionally unstable wife. He didn't mention Amber by name, of course. He framed me as the one who had lashed out and spread vicious lies. For a few hours, it almost worked. A few of his colleagues, the ones who didn't know the full story, posted comments with sympathetic prayer hands emojis. A couple of people even messaged him privately, offering their support. That was his first mistake. He underestimated how many people had been in that ballroom. He underestimated how fast gossip travels in a corporate environment. Within 24 hours, the truth started leaking out. Someone anonymously dropped a photo in the comments section of his post. It was Gregory and Amber at a company happy hour months earlier, his hand way too low on her back. Then another person, likely a disgruntled coworker, posted screenshots of texts he'd accidentally sent to the wrong group chat, bragging about finally trading up and how his new model was a lot less complicated. The dam broke. And then came the hashtag #LightsOnGregory. It started with a coworker of my brother-in-law's who had heard the story. He made a joke on Twitter about my line from the dinner table. Someone else retweeted it, adding the hashtag. Another person reposted it with laughing emojis. Within a day, it had spread like wildfire. It transcended our personal drama. People started using it to share their own stories of cheating partners, toxic bosses, and arrogant exes. Suddenly, Gregory's name wasn't just office gossip. It was trending. I remember sitting at my sister's kitchen table, scrolling through the feed on my phone while Daisy was at school. It was surreal. There were memes. There were stories from other women who had dated men just like him. My personal nightmare had become a public cautionary tale. He panicked. He called me in the middle of the night from a blocked number. His voice was frantic, unrecognizable. Lorraine, you have to take it down. Call them off. You don't know what you've done. They're destroying me. My career is over. I said nothing. I just listened to him spiral into pathetic hysterics, and then I calmly hung up the phone. He wanted me to clean up his mess. That was a job I was permanently retired from. Next, he tried the media. A local lifestyle blog, the kind that features plastic surgeons and real estate agents, ran an exclusive interview where he played the victim again. He talked about the immense pressures of high-level corporate life, how women just didn't understand what it took to be a provider. The comments section shredded him. People weren't buying his sob story anymore. Because I had receipts. And I didn't even have to be the one to leak them. Someone at his firm, clearly fed up with his arrogance and wanting to distance the company from the scandal, sent an anonymous email to a well-known local business journalist. Suddenly, his corporate expense reports were circulating online. Dinners for two at five-star restaurants, hotel stays on weekends, even a receipt from a jewelry store for a very expensive necklace, all charged to the company as client entertainment. It was no longer just about infidelity. Now it was about corporate fraud. His firm had no choice. By the end of the week, a sterile internal memo announced that Gregory Johnson was placed on indefinite administrative leave pending a full internal review. We all knew what that meant. They were cutting him loose. And Amber? She vanished. Deleted her LinkedIn, her Instagram, everything. A coworker told Beatrice that she'd been heard screaming at Gregory in the parking lot one last time, yelling about how he had ruined her reputation and her career prospects. She was last seen cleaning out her desk. The final, most devastating blow came from a place he never expected. His own father, a man who had built a respectable manufacturing business from the ground up, a man Gregory had spent his whole life trying to impress, released a statement to the press. I read it twice, unable to believe the cold, final words. The Johnson family does not condone dishonesty, financial misconduct, or behavior that disrespects the sanctity of marriage. We stand with those who value integrity. In one brutal sentence, his family severed the rope he'd been clinging to his entire life. Without their name, without his job, without Amber to prop up his ego, he was completely, utterly exposed. And me? I stayed quiet. I didn't have to fan the flames. His downfall had its own momentum now, a raging fire fueled by years of his own arrogance. For the first time, he was the one drowning in shame. And I wasn't done yet. The public humiliation was one thing. The real war was just beginning, and it was about to be fought in a courtroom.